Okay. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can I get a few thumbs up if everyone can hear me? Excellent. All righty. Well, we have a lot to cover today, and I am super excited. So I would firstly just like to say hello and thank you for joining us today for our webinar entitled, How Can Social Imagination Help Us Respond to Climate Change? And these are insights from Southbank, Melbourne. My name is Dawn Hewitt, and I am the network coordinator for the Community Connector for Resilience, and welcome you all to today's session. This is our second webinar for the 2024 webinar series, and we are absolutely thrilled to be hosting this important discussion. Today, I'm joining you from beautiful Melbourne on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to recognize the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work, and I would also like to pay respects to elders past and present and acknowledge their continuing connections to culture, community, land, and sea. Hello again, and thank you so much for joining us. Before I hand over to our guest speakers today, I do have a few quick housekeeping items. First and foremost, I need to inform you that we are recording today's webinar, and it will be emailed through to all participants following this session. So please feel free to share with others whom you feel would benefit. You may have also noticed that you already have full control of your mute buttons and camera settings, and this is because we have designed the session to be interactive and really encourage discussion and idea sharing. But when you're not contributing, if you could please mute yourself, that would be amazing. We have also activated the chat function, so please feel free to comment and/or ask questions throughout the session. And we would also love to know where you're joining us from. So please feel free to amend your profile settings, include your name and the organization you may represent. Now, with the practicalities out of the way, please allow me to introduce our guest speakers for today. We have Kira Lowther, who has been leading the Social Imagination program of work with the Centre for Public Impact in Australia New Zealand team since January 2023. She has a background in public health, nutrition, and evaluation. She loves her evaluations and believes that none of us are better than all of us. We also have joining us today, Asitha Bandaranaka Yaka. And Asitha, I did that so well before this session, so apologies for that. He's been supporting the social imagination work alongside Kira. He has experience in civil engineering, finance, and grassroots nonprofits, who enjoys releasing the capacity of communities to thrive. Today, we are so thrilled and privileged to have Kira and Asitha sharing what they've been up to with the Imagination and Southbank project, sharing some insights and learning and what is coming up next. So over to you, Kira and Asitha, and I will get that PowerPoint ready for you now.
Thanks so much, Dawn, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. We've got 26 people, that's super exciting. I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, and yeah, really excited to share what we've been up to and to hear your thoughts and feedback and yeah, what might we do next. So we have a game to start with. We always like to start with a game because that's the best way to do life generally. And this game is called Dream On. So can we have the next slide? Oh, great. Not that it's massively instructive, but that's the Dream On game. So what we're going to do is, back one. We've got a list of statements and we want you to say dream on in response. You can be off mute. We're open to a bit of chaos that might bring. So there's two ones. When Az says something, I want you to say dream on, and then when I say something, I want you to say dream on, and that's how the game goes. It's called the Dream On game. Okay, so are you ready, Az, to start?
So for our first Dream On statement, it is money available to fund nuclear submarines. Dream on!
Dream on!
Dream on!
Money is available to fund free, high-quality education from pre-kinder to higher education.
Dream on.
Dream on.
More bypasses and private transport infrastructure. Dream on.
Dream on!
Dream on.
More
This is hard.
efficient, I know, isn't it? More efficient, affordable, convenient public transport.
Dream
on.
Colonizing space. Dream on.
Dream on!
Dream on.
Decolonizing our civic infrastructures as institutions and systems. Dream on.
Dream on.
Dream on.
What a depressing game, huh? So this game is set up to demonstrate what some people controversially call the eugenics of imagination. Whose dreams get to live and whose dreams do not get to live. And the dreams that generally get to live are the ones that are in line with the big narratives that shape our society. And the dreams that are not aligned with these big narratives generally don't see reality, even though, as we clearly saw in the reactions of the group here, they might be aligned to our values and the things that we really want to see. And social imagination is the process of seeing these narratives and the scripts that sit under them and challenging them and thinking, how might we write different scripts and imagine together a world that we would like to live in and to pass on to the next generations. It's the practice of getting together and imagining new ways of being and doing. And it's about society, and it's about the people in it and the norms and rules and scripts that govern the way that we operate in society. There's a lot of people saying, and we would agree with them, that we are experiencing a crisis of imagination. And it's exacerbated by the context that we find ourselves in. Stress, trauma, scarcity, these all undermine our ability to be creative and to find creative solutions. And so therefore, this crisis of imagination is also a crisis of action. So social imagination, as we see it as a method or a practice, is an invitation to see these scripts that sit under the narratives that govern our society and reimagine them to, as we were saying, create these features that we need. And this is particularly important and necessary in the context of our response to the climate crisis. So to highlight some of the narratives that are around our response to the climate crisis, we're drawing on some research done by the Sydney Institute of Environment, the Sydney Environment Institute at UTS in Sydney. And these researchers found that there are three narratives that govern the way we think about how we might respond to the climate crisis. And the first is business as usual. Basically, those climate scientists are super alarmist. We'll just crack on and everything will be fine. It will come out in the wash. We've been through this before and it's not as bad. So that's one. The second is that technology will save us. So we're getting better and better solar panels, green electric cars, and kind of sit tight and wait for the technology to rescue us. And the third is we're all doomed. Doomerism is futile. There's no point. Dig yourself a bunker, buy yourself the beans, and just sit it out. And we see, these. I recognize all of these narratives. I see them on my social media. We see them in the mainstream media and in our culture. But none of these scripts encourage action. None of these scripts offer much hope, and none of them contain the seeds of agency for normal people. The work of the Sydney Environment Institute went on to share stories about communities around the world who are subverting these scripts and achieving amazing things. These groups who are working together to organise and to act and protect their livelihoods and the futures in the face of the beginnings of the climate collapse that they can see. And we think that engaging in social imagination involves sharing these ideas and the weak signals that we begin to hear that hint at the future possibilities that we would be proud to pass on. And it's a practice that enables us to imagine a new kind of like off-script possibilities together and then beginning to build them. So we wanted to talk a bit about why we got into this work. We got into this work when we realized the extent to which we're using old tools and old narratives and scripts and approaches to tackle these new complex problems. So challenges like climate change or inequity or reconciliation of Indigenous peoples and many others demand a response at a scale that we have never seen before. So we need imagination to see and then bust out of these scripts, write some new ones about the role of communities in the context of the climate crisis, and consider to what the possibilities might emerge if the relationship between the communities and local and state and federal government could be reimagined into more of a partnership, working together, mutually accountable, rather than this kind of transactional relationship where community members are consumers who exchange their votes for services. We saw it in the Sydney work that others are getting to know about in the climate space. It's always the communities that are under the radar doing this amazing work. And we thought, what might be possible if we used our role as CPI, reimagining government, to say, if government is a platform for doing good things at scale, what's possible if we can work with government to get on board with this, to really use that platform to become involved. And we realize that we need to dramatically revise the way we work together as communities and governments to meet these challenges. And social imagination might be the way into beginning this work. So we worked with the City of Melbourne in the Southbank and with Ryan Hubbard from Hinterland Labs to design and deliver these workshops and package of support to people who lived or worked in the Southbank to encourage a richer social imagination that created a sense of belonging to each other, to Southbank and the planet, that we hoped would spark and incubate more meaningful climate action. So we've got I'm passing over to Az now to take you through the project overview that we went by.
Thanks, Kira. Yeah, thanks, Don. Can we go to the next slide after that one? There we go. Great. So project overview. The planning for this obviously does take a bit of time, but when we did end up kicking off these, it was in September, and we actually spent a little bit of time before that working quite closely with the City of Melbourne and their community engagement team to help us find the right people to be in the room and finding those pockets in community of people that were really interested in this. And there was a lot of pre-work involved in having conversations with this group and really understanding where they're at and how they're coming to this work. So we planned a series of 5 immersive workshops across September and October. And that was really interesting to see who would be available to be able to commit to coming to 5 workshops and the kind of people that would like to be involved in this. And we'll play a little video a bit later on that goes into a bit more detail about the workshops themselves and what happened in the workshops, much better than I could explain them. So we'll wait for that to come through. But I wanted to touch on a little bit about what happened afterwards. And we worked a lot on belonging in these workshops because we identified that belonging is key to a sustained effort from a group of people to want to continue to do these actions and carry them forward. So as part of that, after the workshops wrapped up in October, we continued to meet with these group of Imagineers, as we call them, on a monthly or 6-weekly basis to see where they were at with these efforts that they were going to continue doing and providing some light scaffolding for these conversations to happen and keeping the group sustained. And as part of that, we connected them with technical experts. Don, if we can go to the next slide, there might be some images that come up. There are, yes, there's a little bit of information there about the workshops. That's people doing lots of activities and games there with the crew, all in the service of creating that belonging and connection with the team. And we invited along a bunch of experts, a poet to do world building and really expand that imagination practice. And if we can go to the next slide, there's an image of, we connected this group after the workshops with technical experts and design futures students to really take their thinking to the next level and expand what their approaches could be. If we keep going to the next slide, we also went and had in March, a celebration event at the Malthouse. This was after a few months of workshops wrapping up. We got everyone together again and invited a whole bunch of people who were interested in this work, City of Melbourne people and people from other local councils as well. And this was an opportunity for the Imagineers to talk about what they've done, what they got up to, and where they're going next with this work, and really build support more than we could offer them ongoing at this point, and really for these efforts to kind of take on legs of their own. If we go to the next slide, there might be one more. And yes, to really grow and develop these ideas. So that's kind of where we're at now in mid 2024. And that's a very brief recap of what's happened. If we can go to the next slide, I think we've got a video there that will, where you'll get a chance to meet some of the Imagineers and hear a little bit more about what happened during the project, which will be a great overview of this. While we're waiting for some videos to play, I might spruik one of the events that have come out of all of this is something called the Fab Festival that's happening this weekend. Sorry, on the 19th in Southbank. So anyone who's local, you can meet some of the Imagineers, and it's actually, it's a festival that's happening in Southbank. It's kind of like a market, but with way more interactive activities and food and dancing. So that is something for anyone who's local to Southbank. Definitely go check that out, and you can meet. There will be about half of the Imagineers, I think, are involved in that project.
Social imagination is an invitation to imagine together the kind of world or society we want to live in. What are our values and how might we be together? What would this look like? I'm Kira Lowther from the Centre for Public Impact Australia and New Zealand, and we want to explore how the practice of social imagination might bring us more expansive thinking around climate action. We began with belonging in the Southbank of Melbourne, exploring how we might belong to each other, to the place of Southbank, to the planet, and to future generations. By exploring ideas around building belonging, we might build solid grounding for sustained climate action. People are more active in places and groups where they feel a sense of belonging, ownership, and responsibility.
My name is Ryan. I'm from Hinterland. We work in belonging, connection to nature and place, to friends and community. We work in design and systems change and in imagination. So we designed a 5-day journey to take people on over a few different weeks. We started with this idea of preparation. We convened a group. We wanted them to meet their fellow travelers. We wanted them to have a shared sense of purpose and to understand the journey that they were going to take.
I think the connections with the community, with the people in Southbank, and how I can best use that within my work as well.
The second day was all about, we called it departure, and it was setting out on the learning journey about Southbank, about each other, about the future, and about different ideas from around the world about how to change a society and to live in a society we could be proud of.
Yeah, it's been a big experience. That's the best way to put it. The way I approach my local environment, the things around me, the people around me, all of that has shifted. It's just opened my eyes to a lot of what's around me and who's around me and how amazing the people around me are and can be.
The third day was we called Tower, and it was up in the tallest tower that you can be in Southbank, and it was all about getting a sense of perspective. We spent a lot of time talking about our own values, what was important to us and why, our cultural and societal values.
Some of these people seem very committed to the community and sustainability, so yeah, it's very exciting. I think the biggest takeaway is just be courageous, just to take a chance and see where it takes you.
Fourth day was called Ground, and we were down in a community center right in the midst of Southbank, thinking about what does it mean to put those big values into practice? What could it mean for our own lives in small ways? What could it mean for Southbank as a whole?
I was extremely excited because I felt at last that someone was actually going to listen, and to go to the length and depth of having a 5-day, full-day workshop, I thought, well, these people are serious. As Southbankers, we love our home. We just want it to feel more like a home. We need change, and we need it now. We can't wait for 5 years' time. We need it now. We want to belong to our homes and not just be passing through.
And the last day was called Return, and we went back to where we began, which was at an art gallery. We tried to bring in all kinds of different modalities, starting with world building and literature, over to design and creativity. We brought in inspiration from around the world about how people are thinking differently about our society. We spent a lot of time, as I've said, on our values and what's important to us. And we talked a lot about our legacy, our place in society, what we might leave to future generations.
I found a new set of friends, like-minded friends that we met outside. We met last Sunday and we were talking like we have known each other for quite a while. And I think I found my first followers or even my leaders, or we collectively, we could be a tipping point. Yeah.
We're a movement.
Yeah, we are a movement. Yeah, that's the word. We are a movement.
The group continues to meet at regular intervals to support and learn from each other and build the belonging that we need to be the change that we need in the context of this climate crisis.
Great. Thanks so much, Dawn. We got there, and big shout out to Mr. Diz Bravo or Dan Ryan for his excellent video editing and production there. And I'll now pass it over to Kira to talk a little bit about what we achieved from there.
Great, thank you. So you can see in the Southbank, the issue of belonging was very live, and that came out of the community consultation. So we really grounded climate action in this idea of belonging, and the scripts that we were trying to break were that you can't talk to your people around you, or this idea of isolation in the high rise was one of the central narratives that we were trying to explore and reimagine. And we achieved like a lot, I feel. Obviously, this kind of work, you don't really see the impact in terms of traditional impact for, I reckon, maybe like 5 or 10 years, because what you're trying to do is change different mindsets and change different ways that people operate. So what we're describing here is more like the green shoots that we feel will grow into something which has the potential, as Rosie said, to be a movement. They feel like they are a movement of people who want to do things counterculturally in the place where they live. So we learned about what is possible when you bring together this diverse group from a place and ask them to imagine a more generative future together. The next slide. Oh, maybe I should just talk about that. That picture there is from our graphic recorder, and this is like the values that they said. We want to build a community which is around these values. We're thinking about future generations. We're thinking about connected to nature, is safe and easy to move around, and approachable and showing care. So then the ideas that they came out were grounded in these values as well. How might we build a world in the Southbank which shows more care, which has more sense of diversity and inclusion? So that's just another part of the work that we did. The next slide would be great. Okay, so this is some data from our evaluation, which was the reflective piece we asked them, our Imagineers, to do at the end of each day. And from our evaluation and some of the practices that we saw, we were able to kind of track a change, an inner change, a transition through some of the Imagineers who documented how they moved from being isolated to connected and supported. And they weren't expecting that. A lot of the people who came didn't think of themselves as joiners. They would never go to a community hub. That's not for them. It's for people who are like, disadvantaged or in need. So this idea that everybody, we are all part of the community and we all can learn and be a part of a community together was an idea that they'd never considered for themselves. And I think there are lots and lots of people who live like this, especially in our urban environments, who don't consider themselves as having anything to offer. We heard that a lot. People felt valued by the experience and that they had something of value to contribute, which I think is something which is quite hard to feel in a dense urban environment, which is quite commodified, really. It's hard to see how you might contribute when everything is so sewn up and sealed. So we saw people moving from the sense of loneliness and isolation to feeling connected and supported. And this, they had something to contribute, which we feel is a significant shift and one that we need more of in society. So the next slide. Thanks, Dawn. This is some more from our evaluation data. So there's a couple of people in the group who were already connected and who were very active in their community, but actually all of them who were working actively felt a sense of burnout and tired and just not sure if they could continue. And through this experience, they connected to others and realized there's a whole lot of people who I've never even worked with before. And they were, in their reflections, they spoke some they spoke so eloquently about that transition that they felt through. So this one here, she's written, I have learned that I am brave, resilient and hopeful, that I am tough and vulnerable, and to be both is to be human. And recognizing those parts of herself that she needed to continue to do this work. If this work is to be sustainable, we have to network people and connect them and remind them of their humanity and step away from this hero model that we just so easily and naturally move into. So yeah, so I think this is there's lots of hearts popping up. I didn't know we could do that. That's gorgeous. It just yeah, I think people resonate with this. Community leaders, often people don't want to get involved. They think they're just going to be drained dry by the need. But if we are together and if we are connected, this is something that communities can do, we believe. So a fresh workforce for the community leaders to work with, so in a more collaborative way and a shared responsibility way, was really, really exciting to see come through. Can I have the next slide, please, Dawn? Thanks. So people were engaging in civic decision making. So there was one group who wanted to build a park on this undeveloped piece of land. I think the only undeveloped piece of land in Southbank, and they were very clear about what they wanted to do. And what happened through the workshops is a retired engineer who had won awards for a sustainable building met a very passionate resident who wanted to build a 10-story park similar to Gardens by the Bay in Singapore, and they are pursuing it. Like, this is wild. But she's like, this is technically feasible. So that was, the fire was lit and it's happening. So now they're engaging in civic processes to have their voices heard. They have lots of questions that are important that the people in the future Melbourne committee meeting are taking seriously. And there is going to be a park. I don't know if it's going to be exactly how our Imagineers dreamt it, but the park is going to happen. And maybe we catalyzed it. Who knows? Who knows? We can never attribute everything to one thing, but these guys are stepping into this space and articulating their needs and drawing on their own networks and their own expertise to create a world that they want to live in and that they can pass on. That's hugely exciting for us. The next slide, please, Dawn. Thank you. So there's other little things that have popped up. There's going to be a community gallery. I think it's maybe even opening next week in the Southgate shopping complex. There's a community gallery, and this idea that everyone is a creative, and to showcase the creativity and the real lives of people who live in the Southbank. So they've submitted some photos, and there's a couple of bits of poetry and some artwork, and there's some fairies that somebody has made. They've all got little stories, and they all speak to the creativity of the community there. So I think it's really important and essential to have that kind of thing in something like a shopping mall, which can almost dehumanize us and make us into this consumer identity rather than citizen identity. There's also a community pollinator initiative to build belonging within and across the high-rise buildings. So that's yeah, someone's exploring like a business case for that, for the community developers to make that a reality. And I know that some community developers are already doing this, but there's a real need that the residents see to connect in their buildings. Yeah, they're holding regular social spaces in buildings. So some of our Imagineers have taking over like the shared spaces to have, board games and just coffees and chats with a big teapot to build those social connections that we need to reduce loneliness and to connect people who have ideas and who have inspiration to make things happen. We're also gathering supporters for this community market ideal, and that's actually happening on the 19th of May at the Boyd Community Hub. It's going to be, I think, some things about education, about sustainability and recycling, but also people selling some stuff and some markets and some cultural activities. So developing this idea of inclusive, engaged, proactive and diverse community, celebrating and being together. And this plans for this innovative park. There's all kinds of wild ideas that you can't even begin to imagine. It's so it's exciting and exhilarating, and who knows where they will take it. But that's part of the tricky thing about this, that we don't know where it will go. We're creating these conditions that we believe if people step into, incredible things are happening and can happen, but we don't know what this might look like. And that's part of the tricky stuff in this work, that we're not in control of what happens, but we 100% believe that if we encourage people to think of themselves as active citizens rather than consumers who exchange their votes for services, different and new and exciting things can happen. And this is happening internationally. We've seen the work of I don't know if people have heard of John Alexander. He wrote a book which was very influential to the Imagineers, and he talks about the subject story, which was when we were subject of the crown, and how that moved in the kind of post-war to the consumer story, where we are consumers and our identity is through what we consume. And now we're seeing a movement of people who want to be citizens, and it means that these people need to be facilitated rather than told what to do. That they want to explore what the options are. They're not content with the kind of the buffet of options which is presented to them as a consumer. They want to create their own options, and they are networked in a way that we never have been before. And we're seeing this in places like Taiwan. We're seeing this in places across the UK, where councils are changing their relationship to their citizens and enabling a more of a collaborative way through. So this work in the Southbank, which was funded by the Climate Change Initiative within CPI, was the beginnings of this. It was our pilot for us to understand what is the kind of the materiality, to use Ryan's term, then what is the materiality of social imagination? Oh, thanks, Karen, that's great. I think there is a slide, but I don't know if I skipped it, thinking we might not have time. Can you go to the next slide to see if it shows up, Dawn? Oh, no, I skipped it. It's skipped. But it's a nice kind of like a table of, no, it's okay, don't worry. It's not there. I thought we wouldn't have time, but we actually do. It's fascinating work that John Alexander is doing, but I think that's basically what we need is to mobilize and to work together, because councils don't have the resources to meet the challenge in a way that is asked of them in this complex and interdependent problems that we're facing right now. So what might we do? And are the questions that we are kind of forming the next iteration of this work around questions like how might residents step into the act of rewriting their script about what is expected of them and engage as citizens, not consumers of services? And then conversely, how might government step into rewriting the scripts of how they engage and see residents as citizens, not consumers of service? And what might be possible in the climate space if this important relationship was reimagined? What might we be able to do and achieve and build that to pass on to future generations? So we're in the position, the very lucky position, where we have some resource from the Climate Change Initiative still, not to fund the whole thing, but we have a co-funding model, and we're looking for some brave souls to work with us to do this work, to create more expansive, just and sustainable futures. We're working with lots of experts in this area who are inspiring us constantly. We had a webinar with Claire Marshall on Tuesday, and one of the things she said to us is, if you want to build better futures, then you have to imagine often, and you have to imagine together, because when we imagine together, it solidifies our thoughts, and we receive others' witness to our thoughts, and we're able to strengthen these weak signals that we hear coming from the future and these beautiful dreams of things that might be possible. When we don't imagine often, we slip back into the comfortable shoes of the narratives that we currently live in, and these narratives are not serving us, and because they do not have the capacity to support us to build the future that we need. And that's where we are. Super excited about social imagination, super excited about the potential, and looking for people who want to do this kind of work with us, and who can work with a co-funded model, and who have the courage to step into something which is quite nebulous and quite unusual, but we think hugely exciting and packed full of possibility. We've got time now for some questions before Dawn does the housekeeping at the end. Is there anything that anybody would like to probe further, or to query, or even just experiences to share?
I have a question for you. First of all, this was amazing. I love it so much. I love that you're starting from a point and place of values. And I guess I just wondered if, because you listed off the different initiatives that have come from this, and you said the work is being done around the world, I could imagine this all coming together as a book that's very empowering, just of case studies and oral histories of these groups and what they've done. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's something you all are interested in doing, but
luckily for us,
amazing.
John Alexander has written a book like that.
Yeah.
So his book Citizens is basically a compendium of stories, and it's about shifting the narrative, isn't it, about what's possible. And so his stories are from around the world, about individuals and groups who have kind of renegotiated the power between governments and individuals and civil society. And yeah, I think there's a real need to do more of it. Maybe I mean, I would love to have a website where people could just like submit case studies. And that's happening in other sectors, like I know in health and social care, people are sharing case studies of how to do that differently. But really what we're talking about here is how do citizens step into a more engaged process, and what is the infrastructure that they need, and how can we bust these scripts that aren't serving us? But yeah, part of it is sharing the stories, and it's beginning. I would love to get more involved in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have about half a dozen questions, but I think I want to leave it to the audience because I can just pick up the phone to you. So,
Oh,
I'll
you
see
are
if
the audience,
others
Karen,
do.
as well. So maybe
will I
your questions
start?
are what other people are thinking as well. So I welcome more questions.
Okay, well, I'll start with one then.
Okay.
So 5 days is a big commitment
It is.
for
It is.
community members.
Mm,
What do you think enabled? It was quite a diverse group, right? And it's
mm,
amazing they participated for that length of
mm,
time. What do you think contributed to their ability to do so?
Well, I think some of them were at stages in their life where they could. So some of them were retired or between jobs. There was one guy who was on a sabbatical, but it's something we definitely reflected on. Like that balance between you need that length of time to build the psychological safety to do brave things. But I'm sure it definitely precluded some people who would have definitely participated but couldn't. So we are for our next iteration of this, we're talking about how might we do that, and that's a co-creation thing, knowing what the context and the community are like. It could be that we start big and then get smaller, or start online with like a 1-hour webinar and then a half day and then in person, and build it up that way. So it's more of movement building, and it requires less commitment. We were so grateful to them because this is our pilot. We'd never done this before. And they were just like, yes, sign me up. So I think it's unsurprising that some of them had really flexible jobs, and some flexible jobs, so they were freelancers, and so they had things that they could move around to enable them to come. And then a big chunk were retired, so they brought with them their wealth of experience from their kind of professional careers and the time that they have, the time rich retirees. But then that often meant that they had maybe less agency and they weren't embedded in systems that needed to change as well. So there's always kind of like trade-offs, and we have reflected on this quite a lot. What enormous trust they put in us to sign up for this, but also who was not there, who could have been there had we had a more accessible model, and how do we hold that space that's needed to build the trust and the psychological safety, whilst also making it accessible for those who, like ourselves, I couldn't have done it. I had to work, So yeah, how do we do that? Where's your picture?
That's getting into the territory of a question I wanted to ask around. You said you kind of creating conditions for people to imagine, like in the room. Like, what are some of those conditions, and how do
we do it?
Help to create them? Yeah.
Well, a lot of it was psychological safety, and then seeing the scripts was the two basically things we did. One of the most powerful things we did was at the very beginning, we invited them, we gave them 15 minutes just to get to know each other. So we divided them into twos and gave them some questions and then some probes, and they just were invited to speak like uninterrupted about themselves, how they came to Southbank, what it meant to them to live in the Southbank, and a little bit about their history. And they all remarked at how unusual it was to have extended time to talk and be listened to, and how almost it was quite moving. There was tears. We just arrived. We just were meeting each other, and we didn't ask them to share back. It was really just to create those connections and that sense of trust and mutual understanding that would enable them to be courageous and question status quo. And then we had a series of exercises that were designed to help them to see the script. So we had one about what are the rules of high-rise living, that not the rules like, kind of walk your dog outside, but what are the unspoken rules of high-rise living? And it was things like you must be clothed in the public areas and do not do your laundry in the pool. These are like the unspoken rules, that the scripts that guide, social behavior in high-rise living. And then we flipped them, like what would be the conditions that would mean that it was the right thing to do your laundry in the pool? And they spoke about, well, what if there was a drought, or so we encouraged them to see the things that shaped their their ways of doing things, and then to think what might other scripts be. And it was coming from a bit of work done by Jane McGonigal in the education space. He said, well, what is necessary about education, and how could education be reimagined? So we did that for high-rise living, to highlight that these scripts can be rewritten. Everything that was created by humans can be recreated by humans, and we can have a part in that. So let's do it. It worked better with some than others, which I think is always the way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, finding the mute button.
No.
Kira, I might just jump in before Kate has a question by the looks. I just wanted to make note of the comment in the chat just about terminology from utilizing the term consumers to citizens or participants. I don't know if you had any comments around that before we moved on to Kate.
Gosh, I so 100% agree. And it's about expectations, isn't it? That people will do things for us. We recently had an issue in my kids' school, and I was like, we can do better than this. And I could see the woman I was talking to look at me like, who's this we? And I realized that I had internalized the language of, because I've been doing all this work about how if I'm a parent at the school, I'm responsible for how this school runs. And we as a collective can do better. But she looked at me as if I'd grown an extra leg, because she hadn't been thinking about this stuff for the last year and a half. And you realize how it is countercultural, and language does change how we see things and how we engage with these ideas. What does it mean to be a citizen? What do we have at our disposal? We have each other, and we need to get connected to be able to do that.
Brilliant. Over to you, Kate, if I can give you the floor.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Kira. Oh my goodness, this is the secret sauce to capacity building, to social change. Oh my goodness, can we just clone you and have you, in every region of Australia? I'm running off after this to get John Alexander's book, and I'm going to dive into it. It looks incredible. But thank you. I just wanted to say, this has inspired me so much, because actually what you've brought together is so many elements that people grapple with about community capacity building. And to hear how you've done it, and to actually create the space, and like you say, the psychosocial safety, the trust, and the time frame, and how you did it, it's beautiful work. I celebrate you. And I also wanted to ask, is there a kind of continuing relationship of stewardship that you have with what you've seeded at Southbank? Is it that you keep sort of touching in and stewarding that group, or are they in full flight mode on their own now?
Well, we've gone back and forth on this quite a lot, because we want to honour their autonomy and their ability to do this, but also give the right amount of scaffolding, because new relationships need scaffolding. That's why we did action learning sets afterwards. So monthly we met in their different buildings actually, and then once in their gorgeous library where Lord Mayor Charitable Foundation are set as well, to kind of like to build to have a cup of coffee together, have a bit of cake, and share each other's company, and then what they have been up to, so they could encourage each other and kind of troubleshoot together. And but we can't keep doing that indefinitely, and it's not even helpful for us to do that indefinitely, because it's their space, and naturally as well the relationships will evolve, and there'll be some who get along better than others. That's just humans, isn't it? So we did that monthly. So we finished in October, we did that in November, December, January, February, and then in March we had this big event at the Malt House. And sorry, I just got off my train of thought. Oh, it's at the Malt House. And then after that, we've kind of like stepped back a bit. So we've pinged them a couple of emails, and we've been writing kind of like the reports, the evaluations, and that kind of thing. And we're thinking about like, how do we say, hey, we're still here, we're still interested, but not crowd. I don't want them to be looking to us to be doing this. It has to be sustainable. So we need to step back. But I think it will be different for every group, really. Respecting them to kind of do what's right, but also saying we still are very excited about what you're doing.
Thank you. That's fabulous.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Karen, you were on mute. I'm not sure if you were trying to make a comment there.
I was just kind of smiling to myself. I'm happy to wait to see if others have questions.
Okay.
Hi, Kira. It's
Hi, Liz.
Sue. How are you? Great work, a great story, and I really appreciate the way you've been able to tell that story. That's an important part of it. I guess I was just wondering also about the agencies that have been involved. Like, what's it meant for them as well? Like, how has that sort of support and interaction, how has that influenced what happens from an agency point of view? And has that also created any conditions for agencies to actually collaborate?
That was some of our highest hopes, really, for this work, that we would get. You mean agencies? You mean like government agencies?
Yeah, or even City of Melbourne, or whoever was involved externally that felt that they wanted to support this initiative. So yeah.
I think part of this was like a bit of an identity struggle of the project at the beginning, in that people saw it as community engagement. And so when we approached the City of Melbourne, we were saying, we want to do this, we want to work with you. And ideally, we wanted people from City of Melbourne to come and reimagine their role alongside us. But that's not actually what happened. And I'm not entirely sure why. I think maybe the 5 days had something to do with it. They weren't able to be apart. And we tried to link people to our Imagineers with people in the City of Melbourne to kind of like see, to develop their ideas, and so they could take them seriously and see where there was potential for linking with existing projects and initiatives that are already happening. And that hasn't really happened, in all honesty. And it's something that kind of still puzzles me, and it's something that we haven't quite got right. I mean, this was a pilot. We were still learning at the beginning how to describe it and pitch it, and how to communicate that this isn't community engagement, this isn't capacity building in the traditional sense, this is an imagination adventure, and we're all going on it together, and it takes courage on all sides to engage in it. And I think had we framed it differently at the beginning, we would have got different engagement from the agencies. But as it was, we didn't get as much engagement as we, in our wildest hopes, might have seen. And I think it's about expectations and what they perceived it to be, rather than what we were dreaming up. Which is a pilot, huh? Next time.
There's always next time.
Oh, I hope so, yeah.
Thanks, Kira.
Thanks, Liz.
Probably we have time for a few more questions for anyone that wanted to just jump right in. Feel free to unmute.
All right, I will jump in again. Kira and Ash, I'm thinking about community. There are places in our communities that have that trust that you were talking about. There are already little nuggets and hubs of trust. I'm wondering how you think this kind of work might go if you start there, and you start where that trust already exists, and communities are saying, we want to think about this stuff. We want to reimagine our futures.
Yeah.
I guess, is that a springboard?
Wow, that would be amazing. And that would be the best, really. To have that already established means that you can start running already, basically. And then these ideas land so much better because there's a safety there to think wild and creative thoughts. Some of the work that Claire Marshall was talking to us about was about kind of the capitalist system that encourages competition undermines creativity and creates a kind of like a trauma and stress anxiety response and a scarcity mindset because of the competition side of it all, that undermines our ability to be creative and to source alternative solutions, because we're like, I can't share this idea, my IP. And that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're all in this boat together that we have to share, and we have to encourage each other. So if you already had that trust established, I mean, that just would be incredible. And in my wildest hopes and dreams, Az and I are talking about, imagine if we were to get a community that already had that kind of, the social infrastructure was already there, and it would just be a case of listening and figuring out what of this fits in that context, and how these ideas might look in that incarnation, in that context, and working with them to make the most of these ideas and different ways of doing things and the resources that there are out there.
Yeah, and I guess I will be a little self-indulgent. I guess that's the point of the connector hosting this and sharing it with our networks, because I think there are those communities out there, and there are organisations we've been supporting who are working with those kind of communities, and I'm hoping some of them are online now and thinking, oh, I have to reach out to Kira and Ash. So yeah.
Well, that's the great thing, is that we have this co-funding model as well. So we're aware that to do this kind of thing well is often really expensive, and we think we can do it more affordably this time because we've got the pilot experience under our belts. But we also have the co-funding from the Climate Change Initiative, who are there. You know, it's kind of risk capital from CPI to think what else is out there? What might we do? What can we kind of like encourage and grow as alternative responses to these challenges that we face? And in our role as reimagining government, this idea of a reimagined relationship seems really central. And yeah, what might be possible?
And if there are not-for-profit organisations and friends out there, please come talk to us.
Absolutely.
At the
Yes.
foundation.
Yes, definitely. Please come and talk to us, even if you just want to tell us about something that you're doing that we need to know about. That will help us, and we're super happy to, you know, share the platform that we have as CPI to talk about these ideas more widely, and to do more of it again together would be the best.
Excellent. Kira, Asifa, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your comments and discussion points and for joining us today. I found that really fascinating, and I'm super charged by some of the concepts, and to even see the implementations already in action. So that's congratulations to you all on that.
Thank you. And thank you so much for hosting us. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this to a different audience.
We look forward to other communities that will be sharing their story of social imagination down the track, right? That's what we hope for. I have put in the chat a link to a really, really brief survey. It does help to inform how we better provide and curate our programming throughout the year. We're obviously quite new, but we really value that. So I've put that in the chat. For those of you that like to do things on a QR code basis, I'm going to share my screen. We've got that there, but I've jumped ahead slightly because I also wanted to share with you some of our partner organizations that we support are also running some events that we'd like to endorse. And the next one coming up is on the 21st of May. And this is around managing volunteers during disasters. So if you'd like more information, please feel free to contact Justice Connect or myself. So I think that's a wrap for today. Thank you again to our speakers. Congratulations again to all the work that's done. I look forward to meeting so many of you that were part of this discussion today, and you will be receiving this in your inbox very shortly so you can watch and share. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.